On one isolated island, evolution created a carnivore so aggressive it destroys its own species. A creature that screams like demons in the night, that bites through metal, that tears through bone as if it were bread. A mammal with the strongest bite for its size on Earth, where feeding becomes warfare, where survival means killing your own kind. This is the story of the Tasmanian devil, and this is what happens when evolution has no mercy. Tasmania, a fragment of wilderness clinging to the edge of Australia. 240 kilometers of churning ocean separate this island from the mainland. But that distance might as well be 2 million years. 43,000 years ago, sea levels dropped. Ice Age glaciers locked away enough water to expose a land bridge connecting Tasmania to the Australian continent. Animals crossed. Species migrated. And when the ice melted, when the seas rose again 14,000 years ago, some creatures became trapped. Among them, the Tasmanian devil. On the mainland, 3,500 years ago, devils vanished. Dingoes, wild dogs brought by seafaring humans, hunted them, outcompeted them, erased them from existence. But Tasmania became a refuge, an ark, the last stronghold of creatures that once roamed an entire continent. Here, in isolation, something remarkable happened. Or rather, something remarkable didn't happen. Without the pressures of mainland Australia, without dingoes to contend with, without the full weight of competition, Tasmanian devils became frozen in time. Their genetic diversity began to decline 70 to 120,000 years ago, long before the land bridge even closed. They were already vulnerable, already specialized, already evolving down a narrow path. And in that narrowness, they became extreme. The island's ecology shaped them. Dense forests, coastal heathlands, mountains shrouded in mist. Tasmania is among the most carbon-dense forest ecosystems on Earth, its ancient eucalyptus trees towering like cathedrals. Yet the bounty is deceptive. Food sources are scattered. Carcasses appear and disappear. For a carnivore, life is feast or famine. The devil adapted. It became a scavenger supreme. When the Tasmanian tiger, the thylacine, still prowled these forests, devils followed in its wake, feeding on the kills left behind. They evolved to consume everything: muscle, organs, fur, even the bones themselves. Nothing wasted. Nothing left to rot. When the last thylacine died in 1936, a small, unremarkable death in a concrete cage at Hobart Zoo, the devil inherited the throne. It became the largest carnivorous marsupial on Earth. 14 kilograms of muscle and fury, standing barely 30 centimeters tall. A predator that looks like a stocky black dog with the temperament of a chainsaw. But this kingdom came with a curse. In evolutionary biology, there's a concept. When you optimize for one environment, one way of life, you become fragile, specialized, unable to adapt when conditions change. The devils had become too good at being devils, too committed to their brutal way of life. And on this island, isolated from the world, they would face a threat that no amount of jaw strength or savagery could defeat. First, the bite. The Tasmanian devil possesses a bite force quotient of 181. For context, a tiger's BFQ is 127. A lion's is 112. The Himalayan black bear barely manages 44. Pound for pound, relative to body size, the Tasmanian devil has the most powerful bite of any living mammalian carnivore. 553 newtons of force concentrated in jaws that can open to 80 degrees. Wide enough to engulf a wombat's skull. Strong enough to bite through thick metal wire. Powerful enough to crush bone into fragments small enough to digest. The devil's head is disproportionately massive, comprising nearly a quarter of its total body weight when fully mature. Inside that skull, enormous jaw muscles anchor to bone. The teeth never stop growing. 42 teeth in total, like a dog's, but unlike a dog, they regenerate throughout life. prominent canines for tearing, massive molars for grinding, an archaic dental structure unchanged for millions of years, resembling those of hyenas, a perfect example of convergent evolution. This is a mouth built for one purpose: total consumption. When a devil finds a carcass, a dead wallaby, a wombat struck by a car, a bird that didn't survive the night, it doesn't nibble. It attacks. It rips directly into the softest parts first, the organs, the intestines, the belly. And then it continues: muscle, skin, cartilage, bone, hair. Everything disappears down that throat. A devil can consume 40% of its body weight in a single feeding session. 5 kilograms of meat, bones, and fur vanishing in one night. Their digestive system is brutally efficient, processing food in hours rather than days. And when they're full, when they can't move from sheer bloated excess, they do something extraordinary. They crawl inside the carcass. Devils have been observed sleeping inside the hollowed-out remains of their meals, protected from the cold, safe from competitors, close to their food source. They wake, feed, sleep again, for days sometimes, until nothing remains but scattered bones. But devils are not solitary eaters. That's where the real chaos begins. A single carcass can attract up to 12 devils at once. Communal feeding is a social event, unlike anything else in the carnivore world. Solitary by nature, aggressive by instinct, yet they gather, they share, and the noise they create can be heard from over a kilometer away. 11 distinct vocalizations: growls, shrieks, screams, snorts, grunts, hisses, clicks. A cacophony so disturbing that early European settlers, hearing it echo through the Tasmanian night, believed they were surrounded by demons. Hence the name. The famous yawn jaws gaping wide, teeth bared, ears flushed crimson with blood, is not aggression. It's fear, anxiety, a bluff, but it looks monstrous. Before fighting, devils engage in elaborate rituals: sniffing, snorting, growling in escalating crescendos, staring each other down, raising their tails, puffing their fur, red ears glowing in the darkness like warning lights. Under stress, they release a musky odor so pungent it clears the immediate area. And then, sometimes, they sneeze. A violent, full-body sneeze that can make them lose their footing. It's a final warning. Back off, or this gets real. Most of the time, the ritual works. Fighting wastes energy. Fighting causes injury. In a landscape where food is scarce and survival is precarious, every wound matters. So devils have evolved sophisticated mechanisms to avoid actual combat. But when 2 devils are truly hungry, truly desperate, or competing for a mate, the ritual fails. And that's when the violence begins. Devils lunge, they bite. They wrestle, standing on hind legs, pushing with their front limbs like sumo wrestlers. They tear flesh around the mouth. They puncture rumps. They leave scars that last a lifetime. Adult males are the most aggressive, their bodies roadmaps of past battles. Yet even in this violence, there's order. A dominance hierarchy emerges. The largest devil eats first. The others wait. When the alpha leaves satiated, the next in line takes its place. Juveniles are active at dusk, arriving before the adults. They feed quickly, nervously, knowing what's coming. Because in Tasmania, there's one more horror the young must face. Adult devils will eat juvenile devils if they're hungry enough. Cannibalism is rare among mammals. But for Tasmanian devils, it's survival. Young devils, smaller, more vulnerable, have adapted. Unlike adults, they can climb trees. Up to 7 meters high if the tree isn't vertical. It's an escape strategy, a way to avoid being devoured by their own kind. This is the devil's paradox. A species so aggressive it preys upon itself, so competitive that its own juveniles must flee into the canopy to survive their first year. Evolution created the perfect scavenger, but in doing so, it created a creature perpetually at war with its own nature. In 1996, a photographer named Christo Bars traveled to Tasmania. He wanted to capture wildlife. What he captured instead was a nightmare. In his photos, devils had grotesque lumps growing from their faces, tumors distorting their jaws, lesions around their mouths, weeping and raw. At first, researchers thought it was a virus or environmental toxins. But the truth was far stranger. The cancer cells themselves were infectious. Devil facial tumor disease, DFTD, the deadliest threat the species has ever faced. Not a virus that triggers cancer, not a bacterium. The actual malignant cells living and spreading from devil to devil like a parasitic organism. This is transmissible cancer, one of only 3 known naturally occurring transmissible cancers in mammals. The others, a venereal tumor in dogs and a leukemia in softshell clams. But DFTD is unique in its lethality. 90% fatal in high-density populations, 40 to 50% fatal in medium-density areas. The disease first appeared in northeast Tasmania. Within 10 years, it spread across 65% of the island. Population crashes of up to 95% in some regions. An overall decline of 80% since 1996. 25,000 devils remain in the wild. Maybe fewer. DFTD originates from Schwann cells, nerve cells in the peripheral nervous system. In a single devil, sometime in the 1980s, these cells mutated catastrophically. They became cancerous. But they also became something else. They became immortal. Every tumor from every infected devil shares identical chromosomal abnormalities. 13 chromosomes instead of 14. 4 mutated marker chromosomes. Under a microscope, tumors from opposite ends of Tasmania are genetically identical, not to their hosts, but to each other. They are clones. Copies of that original cancer, still spreading, still killing, 4 decades later. The mechanism of transmission is brutal in its simplicity. Biting. Devils bite each other constantly. During feeding frenzies. During mating season. During fights over territory. When canine teeth pierce through skin. When jaws clamp down on infected tissue. Cancer cells transfer. They implant. They grow. Within weeks, small nodules appear on the face and neck. Within months, those nodules become massive tumors, ulcerated, bleeding, spreading internally to lymph nodes, lungs, spleen, heart. The devil's mouth becomes so deformed it cannot eat. It starves. It dies. 3 to 18 months from infection to death. But the true horror of DFTD is immunological. The cancer cells have no MHC molecules on their surface. MHC major histocompatibility complex is the immune system's identification tag. It's how the body recognizes self from non-self. Without it, the devil's immune system cannot detect the cancer, cannot fight it, cannot even see it. The cancer is invisible. This is an allograft, a transplant from one individual to another that doesn't trigger rejection. In medical terms, this should be impossible. Organ transplants between unrelated humans require powerful immunosuppressive drugs to prevent rejection. But DFTD bypasses that entirely. It evades detection through sheer molecular stealth. And then, in 2014, scientists discovered something even more terrifying. A second strain, DFT2, genetically distinct from DFT1, but equally lethal. Originating from a different individual, at a different time, in a different part of Tasmania. 2 independent transmissible cancers, both spreading through the same population. The probability of one transmissible cancer emerging in a species is astronomically low. 2 defies comprehension. Why Tasmanian devils? Why is this happening? Part of the answer lies in their behavior. Devils bite more than any other mammal species. Every interaction, feeding, mating, fighting involves teeth. The transmission pathway is constant. But there's another factor, genetic diversity. Remember the island, the isolation. The 70,000-year decline. Devils trapped on Tasmania became inbred. Their immune systems became too similar. MHC diversity, the very thing that protects populations from infectious diseases, eroded. When the cancer emerged, the population had no defense. Every devil was equally vulnerable. DFTD spread like wildfire because every immune system it encountered was fundamentally the same. There were no genetic outliers, no resistant individuals, just a monoculture waiting to be consumed. But evolution, as always, is more complex than we imagine. In some populations, resistant devils have begun to emerge. Individuals who carry specific variants of immune genes that offer partial protection. Not immunity, the cancer still infects them, but delayed onset, slower progression. Enough to reproduce before death. Natural selection in real time. The genes that confer resistance were always present in the devil population, but at low frequency. Now, with 90% of devils dying from DFTD, those genes are being selected for. Fast. 50 times faster than the average mammalian evolutionary rate. It's a race. Can evolution outpace extinction? For now, the answer remains unclear. Why did nature permit this? A species that eats its own young. A cancer that spreads through the very behaviors necessary for reproduction. An animal so aggressive, it destroys itself. The answer lies in scarcity. Tasmania is not abundant. Despite its lush forests, despite its biodiversity, food for large carnivores is limited and unpredictable. A dead wombat here. A wallaby struck by a car there. Weeks might pass between substantial meals. In such an environment, cannibalism makes evolutionary sense. A juvenile devil is protein, calories, nutrients. For a starving adult, the choice is simple. Eat the young or die yourself. The aggression serves a function. Dominance hierarchies reduce prolonged conflict. The strongest devil eats first, gets the most nutrition, survives to reproduce. The weak either adapt, climb trees, feed at dusk before adults arrive, learn to read social cues, or they perish. And DFTD? The cancer is collateral damage from a hypersocial, hyper-aggressive lifestyle in a world where biting is communication. It's not a flaw in the devil's design. It's a consequence of that design. But here's the deeper question. What happens if the devils disappear? Tasmania's ecosystem is a web. Remove one strand, and the entire structure destabilizes. Devils are keystone scavengers. They consume carrion so efficiently that carcasses rarely persist for more than a day in healthy devil populations. This serves multiple ecological functions. First, disease control. Decomposing animals harbor bacteria, parasites, fungi. By eating carcasses, quickly bones and whole devils prevent the spread of pathogens like toxoplasmosis and leptospirosis, diseases that can infect livestock and humans. Second, nutrient cycling. Devils are osteophagous. They eat bones, which are locked storehouses of nitrogen and phosphorus. When devils defecate, they concentrate these nutrients in latrines, creating hotspots of fertility. Microbes in the soil break down devil scat, releasing bioavailable nutrients that plants absorb. This subsidizes forest productivity, helping maintain Tasmania's carbon-dense eucalyptus ecosystems. Without devils, carcasses persist longer. In diseased regions, carcasses last 2.6 times longer than in healthy regions. This attracts different scavengers, feral cats, black rats, invasive species that wouldn't normally compete with devils. And this is where the cascade begins. Feral cats are one of the greatest extinction threats to small mammals on Earth. In Australia alone, cats kill over 1 billion native animals every year. Devils suppress cat populations through direct predation, competition, and by creating a landscape of fear. Where devils are abundant, cats avoid carcasses, avoid open areas, avoid risk. But where devils have declined, cats flourish. Camera trap studies show that in diseased regions, cats scavenge more frequently. They consume more carrion. Their activity increases across the landscape. And with more food, with less competition, their populations grow. Small native mammals, bandicoots, bitongs, potaroos are disappearing from areas where devils have vanished. The very species devils occasionally prey upon are now more threatened because devils are gone. It's a trophic cascade. Remove the top carnivore, release the mesopredators, extinguish the prey. But the effects go deeper still. Recent research reveals that devil scat alters soil microbial communities. The bacteria and fungi that decompose organic matter, that cycle carbon and nitrogen, that underpin forest health, these invisible ecosystems respond to devil activity. In regions with high devil density, soils have greater microbial diversity, higher nutrient turnover, better capacity to store carbon. In diseased regions, these processes decline. The forest itself becomes less productive. This matters. Tasmania's wet eucalyptus forests store more carbon per hectare than almost any forest on Earth. They're a critical carbon sink in an era of climate change. If devil declines reduce forest productivity, if nutrient cycling slows, if soil carbon storage decreases, the consequences extend far beyond Tasmania. The loss of the devil is not just the loss of a species. It's the loss of an ecological function that's been operating for thousands of years. It's the unraveling of a system we barely understand. And yet, there's hope. Conservation programs have established disease-free populations on the Australian mainland, where devils haven't lived for 3,000 years. Captive breeding programs maintain genetic diversity. Vaccine trials are underway, targeting immune stimulation to help devils fight DFTD. Some devils are being returned to mainland Australia, not as a replacement for Tasmania's population, but as insurance, as a second chance for a species that evolution pushed to the edge. Because if there's one thing the devil's story teaches us, it's this: evolution is not benevolent. It doesn't plan. It doesn't care about the suffering of individuals or the extinction of species. It's a blind process, optimizing for immediate survival, indifferent to long-term consequences. The Tasmanian devil is what happens when that process goes too far, when specialization becomes fragility, when aggression becomes self-destruction, when isolation becomes a trap. On an island at the edge of the world, a creature screams into the night, blood-curdling, demonic, a sound that echoes through ancient forests and chills the spine of anyone who hears it. The Tasmanian devil, 14 kilograms of muscle, teeth, and fury. The most powerful bite for its size on Earth. A scavenger so efficient, it leaves no trace of death behind. A marsupial so aggressive, cannibalizes its own young. And yet, for all its ferocity, for all its evolutionary perfection, it's losing. Not to a predator, not to habitat loss, but to a cancer born from its own cells, spread by its own behavior, invisible to its own immune system. A disease so rare, so improbable, that it should never have existed, yet here it is, twice over, claiming 90% of the population in some areas. This is the devil's paradox. Evolution shaped it to dominate its environment, to crush bones, to consume everything, to thrive in the harshest conditions. But in doing so, evolution created vulnerability. The same isolation that protected devils from dingoes made them genetically uniform. The same aggression that ensures dominance ensures disease transmission. The same bite that grants power grants cancer. Scientists are racing to save them. Vaccines, genetic sequencing, captive breeding, reintroduction to the mainland. These efforts might work. They might give devils a future beyond Tasmania, beyond the cancer, beyond the brink. But even if they fail, even if wild devils vanish from Tasmania within our lifetimes, the story matters. Because the Tasmanian devil is a mirror. It shows us what happens at the extremes of evolution. What happens when specialization becomes a cage? What happens when a species becomes so perfectly adapted to one way of life, the change becomes impossible. And it shows us something else, something unsettling. On Tasmania, in isolation, the devil evolved to be the ultimate scavenger. It evolved to consume death itself, to turn decay into energy, to clean the forests of disease. For thousands of years, it held the ecosystem together. But now, the ecosystem is changing. Invasive species, climate shifts, human pressures, and the devil, locked into its ancient ways, cannot adapt fast enough. This is nature's warning. Specialization is a gamble. Isolation is a risk. And when the world changes and the world always changes, the species most committed to the old ways are the first to fall. The Tasmanian devil may survive, or it may become another ghost story, another extinct marsupial, like the thylacine before it, lost to history. But its lesson will remain, in the screams that echo through Tasmanian nights, in the bones crushed to powder, in the cancer cells spreading silently through populations, in the juveniles fleeing into trees to escape their cannibalistic elders. The lesson is this: nature has no mercy, evolution has no foresight, and sometimes the traits that make you strong are the same traits that ensure your destruction. On one isolated island, evolution created a carnivore so aggressive it destroys its own species. This is what happens when evolution has no mercy. This is the Tasmanian devil, and this is the price of being perfect for a world that no longer exists.